All right, everybody, I think we're going to get started. Thank you very much for coming. This is our annual financial aid night. My name is Kyle Drypulcher. I'm one of the college and career counselors for juniors and seniors. Last name is P through Z. I also have Mrs. Bazelak here, who has students' last names L through Q. This is an excellent opportunity to learn a little bit about financial aid for those of you who might be new to the college process, or maybe it's been a few years, or maybe you just need some more information. So, quick show of hands, who here has a senior or is a first kid going through college? Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you're here. Is there anybody who has already had a kid go to college and might be their second or third? Okay. And things have changed, and the FAFSA has changed over the years, especially the last couple of years. So that's a big advantage for you folks to come here, because it's not the same as even it was 2 or 3 years ago. Are there any junior parents here who are just trying to get a jump start? Okay, perfect. We have quite a mix. So just to give you guys an idea, this is about a 45-minute presentation, so we're not going to keep you here forever. We have here Camille Barber, who is a financial aid counselor at Kent State University Financial Services through Kent State University. A lot of extensive experience in the financial aid aspect of the college process. So just the format for each of you, depending on what your evening plans are, obviously we don't want to keep you here for too long. We do about a 45-minute general presentation. We then will open it up to some maybe general Q&A, so you can come around. If you have a specific question, just raise your hand. Mrs. Bazelak, we have 2 microphones here, so she can kind of come around. If you do have more specific questions related to you personally, related to financial aid, Camille would be happy for you to come up afterwards and talk to her privately as well. So without much further ado, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Camille.
Hello. I'm glad you polled everybody, because that was going to be my first move, to see seniors, juniors. What we're going to talk about tonight is mostly the 25-26 FAFSA, that is for next school year, but it should apply for the next few years, so most of these things should apply for the juniors in the audience as well. All right, so just an overview, we're going to start off with some critical questions, things like how do I apply for federal aid, am I even eligible? Can I get scholarships? What do I pay after I get my financial aid? And what do I need to know about borrowing for loans and things like that? The agenda here is to look at the application process, so the process of applying for the FAFSA, applying for colleges, what the awarding process looks like, so you're a little bit more knowledgeable about what goes on behind the scenes, and then what comes to you, the kinds of financial aid that you might be eligible for or to apply, and estimating your costs beyond your financial aid. All right, so let's start with the application process. The number one thing that you want to do, no matter what college you go to, is apply for the FAFSA. The FAFSA is sort of your gateway to any federal aid. It's also what a lot of schools use to figure out your need and your eligibility for other aid at the school. The federal aid comes from the federal government through the school to you. The FAFSA is what the Department of Education uses to determine your eligibility. This is through the FSA website. I'll show you that in a second here. The free application for federal student aid and the guidelines are what we're going to spend about the first half of our presentation on, because it has changed so much in the last couple of years. It has gotten substantially easier, the form itself. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of all of the problems that they had rolling it out. That has not been easy, but the form itself actually has gotten a little bit easier, a little bit more user-friendly. It takes a little bit less time. So you can submit the FAFSA beginning in December. They are trying to push it back to where it used to be in October. So next year, hopefully, the next FAFSA will open in October, fingers crossed. But the FAFSA is open for 25-26 right now. It has opened up for next year. You want to check priority deadlines at every school that you consider. There are sort of rolling deadlines for application, for scholarships, for final deadlines, and every school is a little bit different. Generally, January 1st and February 15th are the common deadlines that you see either for application or for the priority aid. When we talk about priority aid, that's the kind of aid that is either merit-based or it's limited, and they will take the people that have applied first, who got their FAFSA in first, and when that aid is gone, it's gone. So you want to watch out for those deadlines. The 24-25 FAFSA will use the 2022 federal information. The 25-26 FAFSA will use your 2023 federal tax information. There is something called the Direct Data Exchange. This pulls information directly from the IRS. So in the old days, you had to fill out everything about all of your taxes. You have to go find them, you have to plug it all in. With the Direct Data Exchange, you just sign a thing that says, I consent that this branch of the government can talk to this branch of the government, and then they give all of your financial tax data directly into the FAFSA. You don't have to write it all out. And we'll look at that screen in a moment. The first thing that you are going to have to do is create a federal student aid ID. We'll call it the FSA ID. This is an ID that's going to follow your student the entirety of their college career. And so you as a parent will have that one FSA ID throughout the entirety of all of your children's college careers. That's why it's important to set it up early and keep track of it. It is an electronic ID, and we don't recommend that you use an email that might change. So you don't want your student using their high school email. You might not want to use your work email, because if you change over time, you want to be able to come back and use this again. So even creating a Gmail or a Yahoo mail that is where you will put all your FAFSA data is highly recommended for both you and your student. And you do need separate. The parent contributors need their own separate email with an FSA ID. The students need their own separate email with FSA ID. You don't want those lines getting crossed, because that's when we start seeing those complications where people have submitted the FAFSA but they can't get back in to make changes, or they can't figure out where it went. It's because they were using the same email addresses or FSA IDs, and that gets complicated. All right, so what do you need to apply? Before you start, you should gather some information that you're going to need to put on there. Things like your social security numbers, everybody's email addresses, your federal tax information, including the W-2s. You may not need that if you use that Direct Data Exchange, but it's good to have it before you start, just in case you need it. You also need records of untaxed income, child support, voluntary contributions to retirement accounts, and your cash on hand, your checking, your savings, your account balances, and business investments. All right, studentaid.gov, that's going to be the email address that you want to remember the most. Studentaid.gov is where you do the FAFSA. Later on, we're going to talk about the Parent Plus loans. That is through studentaid.gov. When you do graduate loans, if you need information about the FAFSA, if you need to go back and look at the loans you've already taken out, studentaid.gov is your portal for everything federal aid related. When you first go to studentaid.gov, it will ask you, are you the student or are you the parent? Students should start this first. It is easier if the student goes in first, fills out their information, and then sends it to the parent. You can do it the other way. It just tends to go a little bit more smoothly if you establish the student first. This is, the next couple slides are going to be images of what you see when you go to studentaid.gov. It is very user-friendly. There are videos all along the way. It's going to introduce you to what the FAFSA is. It's going to talk about contributors, and that's usually our biggest question. Who is my contributor? Is there a divorce? Is there a remarriage? Are people living different places? That's really everybody's biggest question. And the new FAFSA has guides that will walk you right through that. You answer the questions, and it will tell you exactly who you need as parent contributors on your FAFSA. It's very helpful. So once you figure out who is going to be filling this out, it will tell you what to expect. It will tell you what will happen after you submit your FAFSA, which I am also going to tell you in a moment. And then you can start your FAFSA form at the bottom. Here's the consent page. This very scary legalese. I promise you it's not scary. When you are approving this consent, it's literally just saying that the FAFSA can bring your tax data on. I still recommend that you read all this just to make sure. If you do not consent, then you're going to have a much longer process of having to put everything in manually. There's a much higher probability of error, because if anything you put in doesn't match what they expect to see, then you're going to have to start all over again. Cannot emphasize enough how nice it is to just use that direct data exchange. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can enter things manually. Here are some things it's going to ask, and this is still in the student view. They're going to ask your personal circumstances, things like marital status, college plans, do you have any dependents, do you have children of your own? And the reason is because we have adult students out there, right? Students that go to grad school that have yes answers to all of these. But it will ask your 17 and 18-year-olds, are they married, do they have children, are you in the military? Are you going to apply for direct unsubsidized loans only? We're going to look at that in a second, because that is something that has changed to be more clear on this one. And it will ask for parents' marital status. Student dependency status. Every once in a while, people will say, well, if I don't put my information in, then my student will just be considered on their own, because I'm not going to pay for their college, so I'm just going to have them say that they're independent, and then they can do their own thing. That won't work. The Department of Education will consider a student dependent until they're 24 years old, whether or not you're paying for them. So if they're under 24 years old, we have to mark them as a dependent. Your finances will be factored into this, and then we can go from there. If a student marks that their parents are unwilling to fill out the FAFSA, they lose out on Pell Grants, they lose out on subsidized loans, which are the better loans, and all they can have is the direct unsubsidized loans. So they will still get aid, but they're missing out on a lot. So we tell people absolutely follow the questions. If it says you are a dependent, yes, mark that you are a dependent. There will be a section later on where we can talk about special circumstances. But it's best to make sure that you put in all the parent information you have on the dependent students. All right, once your student has put in all of their information, it will ask them to invite the parent to the FAFSA form. And again, it will tell them who their parent or their contributor should be. They will need social security numbers, and they will need email addresses for the parent contributors. If you have a married filing jointly tax situation, you only need to have the one email address for the one FSA ID. If you are in one of those circumstances where there are multiple contributors, then your student has the opportunity to put in multiple social security numbers and email addresses. There are some demographic questions. These questions are not used for anything aid related. These are simply used for data gathering. They will ask things like citizenship status, parents' education, line of duty, high school completion status, and again, it's just information that the Department of Education gathers. The schools don't even get this information. Then it will ask for student assets. We would assume that your student is probably only going to have a savings account, maybe a checking account, but they do have to put those in as their student assets. They put in their tax information. I was about to tell you more stuff, but I'll wait until later. All right, and then you can select the colleges. This is the fun part, really. This is where you send your information to every single college that you have in mind. So, you can put up to 20 schools. You can see our federal student code for Kent State is right there, because of course you're going to apply to Kent State too, right? You can also do regional campuses, but whether you do the regional campus or the main campus, it'll go to Kent State in general. If you decide that you want to put in more than 20 schools, when you're completely done filling out the FAFSA, you can go back in, take some of the schools off, and put different ones in. I have never had someone apply to more than 20 colleges, but I'm excited to find someone who does. The schools that get your federal data, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are absolutely applying there. It just means that you want your information to go there in case you decide to apply later. Once your school gets the information, they might start sending you things like financial aid packages and offers. So it really is in your students' best interest to add as many schools as you might possibly consider. Then your student gets to sign and review. You will get to check your responses. You will not be able to change responses once you submit. You can't just like go back in even though it's the same session. Once you submit it, you're gonna have to go back out and do a different process to edit. So it's a really good idea before you click final submit to double check everything that you've put on this form right here when you get to the review and sign. Make sure that everything is correct. You have all the correct addresses and phone numbers and email addresses and everything that you need. If you get to the screen and you notice that your actual demographic information, like your student's name or social security number, is incorrect, that is not something you can fix inside the FAFSA, because that is data that you put in when you did your FSA ID. So if you notice something fundamentally wrong with the personal information, what you'll have to do is log out, go back to where you did your FSA ID, correct it there, and then come back to finish your FAFSA. Put a loop in there. Does anyone have a question about that one? Does that make sense? All right, and then we're sending it to the parent's email. The parent will get an email with links and codes that you will use your parent FSA ID to access the student version of the FAFSA, the student's connected FAFSA. All right, so there are personal pages once you're logged in. It will show you your activity. It will show your student if the contributor has gotten the invitation, if they have started, if they have completed, so they can see what you've done. So then we get to the parent version. Your student has done their stuff, they've emailed it to you, now you've gone into your link, and you are going to be doing the exact same steps. You're going to check your identity information, you're going to provide consent, give your demographics, enter any extra finances, review, submit, and sign. I think I'm going to skip these unless anybody has questions, because it really is pretty much the exact same thing. You might have a couple more things about the family size, the number in college. Your assets are going to be more complex than your students, but it's the same information, and it does walk you through every single step along the way. Then when you get to your parent's signature, your student will get an email confirmation, and everything does go through email, so they need to check that special email that they set up for their FAFSA. Yes?
So I already have a FAFSA ID because I have a child. I can just link, she can just link something to the current one that I have, and I can edit anything in mine, like, that would have changed.
Yeah, absolutely, because you'll have to refile every year. The question was if they already have an FSA ID from a previous year, from a previous student, can they keep using that? And yes, because you have the one parent's identifying account, and you'll have to redo it every year for each new FAFSA year. But you'll use your same FSA ID, yes. Verification is a process that the Department of Education uses just to make sure that everything is running smoothly. It does not mean necessarily that you did anything wrong. It just means that you have been chosen as part of the process of double checking accounts throughout the year. If you are chosen for verification, your school will be notified, one of the schools that you applied to, put the FAFSA into. One of those schools will be notified, you will then be notified via email, and you will have to complete any of the verification forms that are necessary. The schools will help you walk through this process. It is essential that you complete this verification process because no school can award you until verification is complete. They will usually ask things like, can you send a copy of your W-2, or can you send a copy of this asset, so that we know that it verifies with what you've put in on the FAFSA. And the schools can walk you through that. Now, professional judgment is a little bit different. Professional judgment is a process where you have done the FAFSA, you have gotten all the information back. It says that you should be able to pay a ridiculous amount of money that you can't pay, because that's what everybody comes down to. And you think, okay, this does not actually represent who we are as a family financially now, especially since you're using taxes from 2023. So if you are in a circumstance where you have had a big change, a change in job, a change in marriage status, a death in the family, a significant illness, and you truly do not believe that these numbers represent your family any longer, you can do professional judgment through the school. There's no appeal process through the FAFSA or through the Department of Education, but the individual school can help you through the process of submitting your new data, submitting proof of the changes that have happened, submitting proof of what your family should actually be contributing right now, and they can help walk you through that and get your FAFSA changed. It does not guarantee that it will be changed, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll be given more aid. But if there has been a significant change from the time of the taxes that you're using, you can do professional judgment through your school. And here are some examples of those kinds of things. Like I mentioned before, if there's a loss of unemployment benefits or child support or alimony, if there's very unusual medical expenses, a death of a partner or spouse, a loss of employment or divorce. All right, so what happens next? You've done your FAFSA, everything is completed, it's correct, it's gone through verification, it's gone out to the schools. What do we do with it? We run all of the FAFSA data through our system to calculate your need, the need-based aid that you can have, what we can offer you, and what would be your responsibility. At Kent State, we have a thing called Flashline, it's the student portal, and most colleges and universities now have some sort of online portal that students can log into as soon as the application is processed. Once you are admitted to a school, you have a student account, and you can go in and see all of these things online. At Kent State, first-year students receive paper offers as well, because who doesn't love mail? That's the exciting part, opening that mail that says you were accepted. So we do send a financial aid offer in the mail to new students, but after that, it's all online. All right, so how do we determine your eligibility? There are two main components. The first is the Student Aid Index. That's an index number, and it is calculated from the information reported on the FAFSA. You will be able to see what your SAI number is as soon as your FAFSA has been completed and processed. You will be able to see that online. It is going to be the same no matter what school you go to. That same SAI number is reported to every single school, no matter what their cost of attendance actually is. The cost of attendance is the budget that you are given for attending a specific school. There are two components to that. There's the billable costs, the things that the school will actually send you a bill for that you have to pay up front. Those are things like tuition, food, housing. But then there's also non-billable costs, because it costs more than tuition, food, and housing to go to school. You have things like books and materials, supplies, transportation, just living expenses. So every cost of attendance will factor in some of those extenuating costs, even though they're not the things that you're billed for. And financial need is usually calculated up to that full cost of attendance, billable and non-billable. All right, so let's talk about that SAI again. It is calculated by the Department of Education based on your FAFSA data. It is an index number, not a dollar amount, which is very confusing because you'll see it subtracted from things like it's a dollar amount, but it's not. It's an index number. It stays the same. It determines you're eligible for federal need-based aid, like grants. It does not affect your ability to get loans, of course, but it does impact the type of loan, either subsidized or unsubsidized, and we'll look at those two types in a minute. And it will determine the need-based aid, things like grants. Okay, cost of attendance. We already talked about this, billable, non-billable. If you take your invoice of your billable costs minus the financial aid that you're offered, what's left is what you are going to have to pay. This does vary widely from college to college, and there are calculators everywhere. There's a calculator for this on studentaid.gov. There's a calculator on the Kent State website. Pretty much every college is going to have a section in their bursar's office or their billable costs that will say, here is a calculator you can use depending on the major you're in, the kinds of costs you're going to have, the kind of housing you have. Here's what we estimate your costs are going to be. So really look around on the websites of the colleges you're looking for those calculators. All right. So that's the end of the FAFSA section and the general information. Let's take a break. We're like halfway through. We're doing great. The FAFSA you have to reapply every single year, yes, because it uses the new tax data every single year. Well, what we usually tell people is somewhere between October and December, that's when you're doing your finances for the next school year. And we tell students every time you go home on holiday break, that's when you do your FAFSA and all of your scholarship applications. The December holiday time is the perfect time to make financial aid your full-time job. October through December. So the FAFSA usually opens in October. It definitely is opening in December. And then a lot of those scholarships, I'm gonna end up repeating this in a second, but a lot of the scholarships, you have to get those applications in by January. So, yes,
So going back to the slide about verification.
yes,
You said that comes from some college, so if you start out submitting to a whole bunch of colleges and then maybe you think, oh, yeah, I'm not interested in that college, but if they send you a verification, you have to do it anyway, regardless of where it's coming from?
you don't have to do verification from a school you're not gonna go to. If you get selected for verification, you can do it through the school you choose to go through.
Okay, so it's a college specifically, it's not a FAFSA general verification.
The verification process is a FAFSA generated thing, and they send it to the schools that you have listed. So the schools will be able to see, once they get your FAFSA data, they are communicating back and forth with the Department of Education about your FAFSA data. So any of the schools you apply to will be able to help you through that verification process. All the schools will see, I can't offer this aid until the verification process is completed.
Oh,
Does that make
you
sense?
can do verification, but you would practically choose to do it through the school you're interested in.
Yes, you have to do verification, but you can choose which school you do it through. That's exactly right. I'm gonna say one more question, and then can we hold until the end?
After you submit, how long does it take to find out your SAI?
They asked nobody heard how long does it take to get the SAI and get the FAFSA data back? That's such a great question, and I wish I could answer it for you. The FAFSA sometimes has a 48-hour turnaround. In last year, when they had all of the problems, it was taking months. So I would generally say, if you haven't gotten your confirmation and all of the processing in a week, you might want to double check, have your student double check and see, is there something missing? Is there an email that you're waiting on? But generally, within about a week, you should usually have been processed for the FAFSA. It might take longer than that for it to get to all the schools. But I would say at this point, we're crossing our fingers, that it'll be about a week processing time. It could be significantly more if they hit those problems again, so I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer on that. It's just gonna depend on if they hit snags again this year. All right, so let's talk about the kinds of financial aid programs there are, and then we'll get some more questions at the end. All right, types of aid. The two biggest types of aid, the categories, are gift aid, which is the good aid. That's the aid you don't have to pay back. That's the fancy aid. Scholarships, grants, things that are given to your student and you never have to pay them back. Then there's the self-help aid. That would be things like work study or loans. So scholarships is the one that everybody wants. This is some Kent State specific information, Kent.edu scholarships. On our website, we have a lot of different information divided by first-year student or returning student, in-state student, out-of-state student. And each one of these has categories that you can go look into. And every college is going to be different. Every college will have a different way of awarding their scholarships. But here you can see some statistics of how much aid Kent State has given out. We have merit-based aid, we have internal scholarships, we have external scholarships. The FAFSA is not always required for scholarships, but sometimes they do use that if they're looking at need-based scholarships. Always pay attention to those deadlines. I even recommend students get a calendar specifically just for their college search. So you can write down the application deadlines, the scholarship deadlines, where the scholarships are, and keep it all in one place. At Kent State, we also have something called Scholarship Universe. Scholarship Universe is a new program. It's a new website where once students are admitted, they can log in, create themselves a profile, And it will start matching them with all of the different scholarships that they can have. One of the hardest things about your scholarship search is that you have to go search for them. You will have to look online, you can look through employers, you can look through your school guidance counselors, but some universities, including Kent State, are starting to put all of their scholarships in one place so that you can apply all through one place or keep them organized in one place. The benefit of Scholarship Universe at Kent State is that it will also update so that you can add more demographic information. You can say, well, now I'm a sophomore instead of a freshman, and it will re-up and show you all of the new things that you're eligible for. So that is helpful to find those generators. What I do want to mention is that you never ever have to pay for those. If you ever find a website that says, get this subscription to find scholarships, back right out of there. Scholarships should always be a free application process, just like the FAFSA is always a free process. You may have to pay to apply to a college. You should never ever have to pay to apply for financial aid. Oh, there it is. There's a scholarship in the first page. Tips and tricks, we've talked about this a little bit already. Start now, complete your applications carefully, answer all of the questions, and be aware of deadlines. Make sure that you are editing those. I know a lot of students also have questions about the scholarship essays. That can be very difficult. We don't recommend using one pat essay for every single scholarship. There are ways that you can reuse some of those things to make it easier on your student, but we do want to make sure that students are personalizing their information for each one of those scholarship applications, just like they personalize applications to colleges or to jobs, because every single one of those is going to be looking for slightly different information. So do make sure that your student is taking the time to fill out these application essays and answer them completely and honestly. So the next kind of aid is federal and state grants. There are a couple different grants that you might be automatically awarded. The Pell Grant is a grant that is automatically awarded based on your eligibility from the FAFSA. Things like the FSEOG, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, OCOG, which is an Ohio grant, and a PA state grant, those are also automatically applied to your account should you qualify. So most of the grants will just be given to you in your financial aid package, whereas the scholarships you actually have to go apply for. So now let's talk a little bit about the self-help aid. The Federal Work Study is a program where your student will have a job through the financial aid department, but that job can be anywhere. It can be on campus. A lot of campuses have external partners out in the business community. They can have a normal job, they get a normal paycheck. There is nothing about it that goes, none of the money goes through the financial aid department, but the tracking of that job goes through the financial aid department. Once that is submitted as Federal Work Study job, that income is not counted towards their income on their next FAFSA. So the benefit of a Federal Work Study job is that you're having a normal job, but you are going to show a lower income on your FAFSA the next year, which will help you get more aid going forward. So that's the benefit of taking a work study job as opposed to just normal student employment. And then we have the loans. There are two types of federal direct loans that you will be automatically awarded via the FAFSA. The subsidized loans do not accrue interest while your student is in school, so that's the better loan. Always want to go with the subsidized loan if you can. The subsidized loan is also a need-based loan, so it is dependent on your SAI. If your SAI is too high, you will not be offered the subsidized, you will only be offered the unsubsidized loans. The unsubsidized loans do accrue interest while you're in school. However, very often, the interest rates on the federal direct loans are slightly better than ones that some students can get just from banks and credit unions. There is a small origination fee, and you will have to go to studentaid.gov to complete your entrance counseling and master promissory note to be able to accept these loans. So even though they're automatically awarded under your student account, there is this extra step of going back to the studentaid.gov to do the paperwork to accept them. Another benefit of taking the federal direct loans as opposed to going outside is that these are the kinds of loans that have slightly more flexible repayment plans. I'm not going to say that any of them will be forgiven because it doesn't look like many of them will be anymore, but there are programs through the Department of Education that help with forbearance, that help with repayment, and they are a little bit more flexible and forgiving than some of those outside private loans. If you have already gone through all of your scholarships, all of your grants, all of your federal direct loans, and you still need aid to be able to pay for college, you can also look at Parent Plus loans. A Parent Plus loan is also through the Department of Education, through studentaid.gov. It is a parent loan, it is credit-based, it does have a slightly higher interest rate, but there are also options for forbearance and things like that when your student is in school. On top of that, if you apply for a Parent Plus loan through the Department of Education and you are denied, your student is given another unsubsidized loan. So no matter what, if you apply for that Plus loan, you're going to get more money, either as a parent or your student getting another unsubsidized loan. And then very last, bottom of the barrel, is those private loans. That's not a federal option. It's through a bank, credit union, state agency. But there are places you can look for more reputable ones. There is a website called Elm Select that will help guide you through the more accepted private loan options for education. If you go to our Kent State website, there is a section for private loans that can guide you to that calculator and through which kinds of private loans would be best for you and your student based on things like grade point average or credit health. All right. So we know we did the FAFSA. We know we look for scholarships. We know that we consider the loans. What is the cost that you will have to pay out of pocket after you look through all your financial aid? You will need to take the cost of tuition at the school you're going for, and you'll have to take the cost of food and housing. Those are the costs that will be billed to you. On our website, you can find cost estimators for all of those things, and most colleges will have a place that will use the current year's data with the caveat that it might be slightly higher for the next year. So again, you take all those bill costs, you subtract the total financial aid, and then you have your amount due. Let's get to the questions. So we're going to look at this review of information, and then we'll go over any questions that the presentation didn't cover for you. So your process right now is complete your admissions application for the colleges you know you're going to go to. Apply for your FSA ID, complete the FAFSA, and start that scholarship search right now. We also talk about making sure that you look at your employer, your student's employer, the grandparents' employer, any community organizations that you're in, the museums that you go to. Look anywhere that you possibly can. Maybe if your student already knows exactly what major they're going to go into, look for professional organizations that your student, in the career field your student is going into. Sometimes professional organizations have scholarships for people going into that field. Everywhere you can look is good for scholarships. You can estimate your costs, and then once you are fully admitted, you can check your school emails regularly for information about verification or updates on your financial aid package. If you're looking for resources, I'll leave these up there for a second so everybody can take screenshots if they need. If you're coming to Kent State, we have Kent State Financial Aid. Even if you're not coming to Kent State, that second address can be really helpful for navigating the FAFSA. On our Kent State website, we have a FAFSA page where it walks you through with videos. The presentation that the updated presentations that we give are on that website. It gives you Q&A. There's even worksheets on there of places that you can put your emails and your FSA IDs. So we have a whole toolkit on that FAFSA website to help you walk through this process. We also have our scholarship website and our financial aid forms website. This is all the information from studentaid.gov. It's also the website for FAFSA, which you can link through studentaid.gov. This is their sort of most recent information about when they're open and when they're not, but they do have updated links almost constantly. So really check out studentaid.gov to find their contact information and get your questions answered there. There's also financial aid social media. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that exactly what you want in your social media? But there are actually a lot of things, especially updates. And with all the changes that are happening, having some sort of up-to-date media that you are attached to see the different updates with the FAFSA and financial aid information is a good idea. If you have any further questions, the Kent State One Stop is a place that you can go to get any of your questions answered, whether or not you're coming to Kent State. Oh, and we are done.